Latest technology, the CD-ROM computer. This is a multimedia system. Internet is that massive computer, right? The one that's becoming really big now.
This is a machine that a lot of people are going to be able to afford.
And thank you so much for tuning in, and also thank you very much, Jed Schneiderman, for joining me this morning as we talk about something that is really important for our industry. How's it going?
It's great.
Good. All right. So the reason why we are sitting here together on a beautiful Friday morning in September, leaves are starting to turn, and it is back to school, and not only is it back to school time, but it's also a time when people are thinking about their careers, making big changes, and recently, I don't know about you, but I have noticed in my attending different events that I'm getting approached a lot more by highly qualified individuals who are really impressive to talk to, that are having a really hard time finding opportunities in our space. Many of them are new to Canada, and have come with with hopes and dreams about landing with their qualifications, and really not having as much of a problem finding a job. And I know that you have been really interested in the HR space, and have done a lot of work around it. And I wanted to spend some time with you this morning and talk a little bit about how you see the industry playing out, and are you noticing the same thing?
Sure. So I think it's really great that we're having this conversation. I think it's really important that we're bringing light to the challenges that a lot of people face. I think there's a number of ways of looking at the current situation. I think macro sort of view is there have been a ton of layoffs in the technology space, and those are well documented. So there are fewer jobs. Companies like Amazon and Facebook and even Shopify, depends where you draw the line within our industry. But the reality is there have been some really strong companies that have been growth engines that have literally both paused hiring as well as cut back on hiring. So that's, I think, an important thing to put out there. Secondly, we all know the state of the economy is, and I'm not an economist, but I think it's somewhat wobbly. And so anecdotally, what I'm hearing is, a lot of companies are either cutting spending or they're pausing spending. And we know that usually marketing dollars, which influence media dollars, are a percentage of overall sales. So if companies are unsure about their future, if they've got high inventory levels in this kind of current semi-COVID period, a lot of companies are probably going to either pause spending or pull back on spending. Those things I think are really important. And then I think lastly, given one of the issues that you touched on, is there are many new Canadians coming into Canada. So historically, about 150,000 Canadians would come into Canada per year. Last year, it was, I think, over 500,000 new Canadians came. The majority come to both Vancouver and Toronto, which is where there are a lot of media and technology jobs. And I think there's projections that it could be upwards of 1 million more people coming in. So you've got a confluence of a not so great economy. When we take a look at a lens through, let's say, the IAB, you've got a lot of companies that have either cut back on hiring or literally cut jobs. And then you actually have more supply of talent. So I think that's really important context setting. What I'm seeing and hearing is, and we can look at it on two buckets or like an axis. And if you want me to talk about it a different way, we can do so. I think there are a whole bunch of folks that are new to Canada that are finding it really hard to break in. And I think there are a lot of people who have decent experience within Canada, and they've been let go or they've been downsized or right-sized, and they can't find jobs. So happy to chat about both. I think the challenges are somewhat distinct for each cohort, and then there are some pieces that overlap where we could probably talk about and ideally help those that are tuning in.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think this makes a lot of sense. In your sort of setup around the confluence of different factors, to me, one of the starkest ones when I'm being approached around jobs is the fact that the bucket of individuals that are Canadian citizens already, or that have been here for a while and have been actively participating in the industry, the bucket of those individuals that are finding themselves without a job is growing.
Mhm.
And so at the same time that I know that this is a growing bucket of existing citizens that are struggling, and sure, maybe they've got some advantage because they have recent Canadian experience, which I'm hot topic, which we'll talk about in a second. But it makes it very difficult to provide guidance to newcomers as they're coming in to say, hey, I'm super qualified and I also am looking for a job.
The bottom line is, when you are looking for a job, there's a startup expression called like jobs to be done. And so the expression is in the context of a product, or something that you create, meaning like, what is the job of a mobile phone? What is the job of a computer? What is the job of a box of detergent? When you're looking for a job, there is work to be done at a company that is tied with growing revenue. And someone's looking for a job, when they are reaching out to network, when they are reaching out to a company, when they actually land an interview, there is an open job because there is work to be done. And if that work gets done, the theory is the company will make more money. They'll drive more revenue, drive more profit. They can make more revenue more quickly, which is a good thing. So all the things associated with the job. The reality is, if you are looking for a job, one has to position oneself as the best person, the best candidate to get that job done. And so if we unpack that a little bit, what that means is you have to be able to demonstrate that your skill set and that your experience, or even your ability, matches what the company requires. So the sort of follow-on thought to that I say to a lot of people, as well as a lot of people that are perhaps interviewing in a new sector, interviewing at a new company, or maybe even interviewing in Canada, and they're sort of starting their journey, is, I'm going to say something somewhat inflammatory. Canadians are somewhat passive aggressive. Canadians don't like to give a hard no. Canadians don't like to end an interview moments after it starts and basically say, hey, you're not a fit. And so the reality is, when you are in front of someone, when you are applying for a job, the person on the other end is simply assessing, I have work to be done in my company, and can this person get it done so that I can move on with my day-to-day, go out and make more money, go out and get promoted, or simply move on to the next challenge. And so when someone is talking to you and interviewing you, they're literally assessing, can you get this job done? And if not, again, inflammatory comment number 2, they just want to get rid of you, right?
But hang on, I'm going to challenge that a little bit, because, or not, maybe not challenge, but just ask back. Or do you believe then that gone are the days of employers looking for the right fit to bring into an organization, even though they may not fit the exact job that needs to be done, right? Because the school of thought would be that you're constantly out there meeting new people and meeting people that might fit with your organization. You're not quite sure where, but that they have a place in your organization somehow, right? So are those days gone?
What I don't think they're gone. What I'm trying to land is this concept of, the person interviewing has to demonstrate or convince to the hiring manager or the frontline talent resource that they are immensely qualified to get that body of work done within the company. Mm-hmm. And so there are different ways that you can demonstrate and show that. And so we're now sort of getting into more practicality, which is, if if one doesn't have a great network, something that you and I have spoken about in the past, it's hard to network. So I believe in this philosophy of give, give, get. So this notion that, if two people are going to get together, there's got to be reciprocity. So one of the challenges that you've highlighted is that a lot of people are reaching out to you. They need work, or they want a better job, or they're underemployed and they want a job commensurate with their experience. They're asking for something and they're not giving anything in return. And that is an impediment to quality networking. So a suggestion that I'll often make to folks is, you can go to a website, you can go to like a company page, and you can take your skills and knowledge and offer something up immediately to that company. For example, hey, I went onto your site and I see that it's not properly tagged. So I had someone talk to me a couple days ago saying, hey, by the way, I see you're working on a project. I think you can optimize your site for search. So, I mean, we're only using search as an example. But that's an example of demonstrating your knowledge when you're reaching out to someone and you're actually adding value, because you're pointing out something that helps that person better run their business, as opposed to the generic note, which is, hi, I'm out of work. Here are all my great qualifications. Do you have time to meet? That is not mutually self-serving. That only serves the person looking for work. So part of it is a mindset where when you reach out to someone, can you add value right away? So,
I think that's really neat. Like what you've just said, because I'm finding increasingly that I'm having to inspire the person who is asking me to find a way to show me that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
I'm finding myself saying, okay, well, you want to be a content creator, then do you have any, a desire to volunteer to create something? Or right. So I feel that I'm having to pull it out of them a little bit. And then also, and this is, this was also from recent conversations, and thankfully I don't get it a lot, but there's a little bit of a, I don't know, recoil a little bit when people hear that, because they're like, oh, you want to like take advantage of my, like, I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. And so I think that times are also changing. I feel like that's a generational thing maybe as well, because I would have never, I only remember times when you were actually working in advance of actually getting a promotion or getting a job, right? Like you were earning your keep before you were recognized, for sure. But that feels like it's waned a little.
Well, and I think we can frame up that idea a number of different ways. If you're really good at your job, if you're really good at adding value, as we said, if a company has a job to be done, you don't have to put in tons of work in order to demonstrate that you're good at something. So let's talk about that. So, one thing that you and I have spoken about time and time again is this notion of upskilling. So you can reach out to someone saying, hey, by the way, I noticed this, and in keeping with, I just got certification on platform A, B, and C, or I just got a certificate in, A and B. So you can still tell a story, and every time you reach out to someone, like, you have to make their life easier because they have a job to be done. They have a mountain of work. And so, in this particular example, you can reach out to someone and say, I noticed this on your website. That doesn't take hours and hours of work. You are not being taken advantage of. You are not doing work for free. And I'm a strong advocate, as you know, of not doing work for free. I don't believe in unpaid internships. But the bottom line is, you can very quickly identify how you can help a company without doing like hours and hours of work. Secondly, is you need to know what you offer and how to best position yourself. So again, something that you and I have spoken about is, if there's a job to be done, what are the roles within a company that you map to easily? Because then you make the job of the hiring manager, the lead in the talent organization, a lot easier. Because again, the reality, and some folks may not want to hear this, is companies have boxes and they want to put people into boxes. And we could argue whether or not that's the right or the wrong strategy, per your earlier point, which is, can people not simply get hired based on the ability to add value? And I think that's part of one story. But one has to say, listen, you have this open job. Hey, I've noticed this. Clearly, there's an opportunity to fix this on your business. It maps to this open job. See, here's proof that I know what I'm talking about, right? And so the reality is, jobs are filling up really quickly because there's a lot of unemployed and underemployed people, and that works against those on the labor side of the equation. But you still have to customize your outreach. You still have to tailor your cover letter. You have to tailor your resume. And what I say over and over again is, you have to find someone on the inside. You have to get to the hiring manager, because the math on just job boards doesn't favor the job seeker. The average job gets about 118 applicants. The average resume is only looked at for about 11 seconds, and only 2% of people get interviews. So it's not advantageous to the job seeker. So you need to find ways of standing out that matter to the person on the business. And that just takes a little bit of effort. And again, let's be candid. If you're not able to do that, you're probably not the best person for the job. And then you have to look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do in order to get better, in order to go out and get the job that I want, or a better job?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm also cognizant of the fact that we are getting a lot of people in from internationally that are struggling on the networking front. How do you make the right connections, and is there, when somebody approaches you after you've done a speaking engagement, or if you've met them just randomly, and they approach you and say, hey, can you put me in touch with, or can you, I need a job. How would you respond? How would you, because they're obviously, they're making an effort because they're at X event, or they're trying to network, but then they're approaching you and basically saying, what should they be asking of you when they meet you, and what should you be responding?
So let's flip the script on this. If someone comes up to you and says, I listened to what you were talking about, and I'd like to ask you a question. When I worked in such and such a country, when I ran such and such a business, this is what we did with great results. It actually contradicts with what you said. Can we have a discussion? That's a very different approach.
Fabulous. That would be.
And think about what you're doing in that question.
Mm-hmm.
You are showing active listening. You are talking about relevant experience. You are advancing a conversation. That is so profoundly different than just walking up to someone and asking for a job. So again, what I say to folks over and over again is, show people how you think. And people are like, what are you talking about? How do I show how I think? And I was like, well, if we go back to the example I just provided, that's a really good example of showing someone how you think. Showing someone that there's an opportunity on their business that they hadn't thought about maps to this idea of jobs to be done. So I have on 2 occasions, and I don't think I'm a good benchmark, but I have on 2 occasions created jobs for myself. Companies were not hiring. I was able to reach a decision maker. I was able to present a story. I was able to talk to them about a potential upside on their business by showing them that in some cases, critical work wasn't being done, or in other cases, there was pattern recognition. It was a US company. And I convinced them that there was similar opportunity in Canada to grow their business where they didn't have anyone on the ground. So all those conversations started with a way of me helping the business and not the business helping me, which was to give me a job. And it's a reframe. And for some people, it's not easy to do. For some people, it's scary. Let's be candid as well. There might be cultural differences. There might be regional there might be a whole bunch of reasons why someone doesn't want to do that. But again, we just saw data come out this week that, 47% of Canadians under the age of 35 are living paycheck to paycheck. There is approximately 50% of people under the age of 35 are worried about their jobs and job security. It's a little higher for men than women. It's a little bit lower if you're between the ages of 35 and 55. But like in the short term, based on all the things that we've talked about, it's not that employers have the power, but there's high signal to noise. They're just getting bombarded with people who want jobs. Folks have told me that they are getting way more applicants for jobs than they ever had. So you need to make it easier for the person to say yes to an interview or say yes to an introduction, the same way sales works. There is ample evidence that suggests there are more jobs out there that don't actually require a high school or a university education. So there is probably a misalignment between the message that we market externally to folks coming into Canada versus the reality. Mm-hmm. I am not politically connected. I am not a labor economist. So I'm just going to sort of park that comment and move on. But that is a reality. Mm-hmm. I think the message to all folks who are in positions of creating jobs and making decisions, foreign work experience is a great thing. Why would you not value experience from someone who's come from a country with 1 billion people? Why would you not value the work experience of someone who has worked in Europe and marketed products across 15 different countries in 15 different languages? Mm-hmm. Like, imagine how hard that is. I, in a former life, have, although it's qualitative, meaning it's a fairly small base, when I ran my own company at Tapped, over half the people that we employed, we were their first employer in Canada. Okay. Mm-hmm. So not a large set, about 25 people over the course of about 7 years, but we were the first company that employed them in Canada. And we had unbelievable results, performance, engagement, loyalty, retention. And these folks have gone off and worked at phenomenal companies, like some of the biggest companies in this country. And we gave them their start. But the flip side is they came in and worked for a small company and took a massive chance on us, even though they had all this great experience. So it works both ways. Yeah. But
so that's the advice.
Open mindset.
Yeah, I think that's the advice that I like to give also, is that have an open mind, because I'm often confronted with, well, all of the top, right? The top players, right? The Fortune 50, right? You've got ins with all these people, and it's like, yeah, but is that really, I mean, you're kind of aiming at a very, very, very tiny target when there are hundreds of companies that are scrappy, that are going to give you an opportunity to learn about how the Canadian, system works and how the culture works. And it's going to give you so much amazing experience. So I think that I would also add that to the advice list of like, just because it's not one of the top 5, it doesn't mean that it's not an amazing opportunity.
Right. So if you look at it from that vantage point, if you're an individual who wants to break into a similar company where you have prior work experience, you have to ask yourself, why would someone hire a person from the outside? The outside meaning someone who's never worked at that company. So ignore where you have your work experience, ignore where you got your degree, ignore all of that. But if someone knows all the systems, all the players, all the ways of working, they're a safer bet for a company to go out and hire. So that's independent of your experience, be it local, be it in Canada or elsewhere. So keep that in mind. So if you go back to the job to be done, your competition is now everyone within the organization who's applying for the job. So how is it that you can do that job better for them? So that ignores like race, creed, it ignores citizenship, all that other stuff. It's practical. If someone knows all the systems and knows all the players, they're a safer bet.
Right.
The flip side, and going back to one of your earlier questions is, and I don't know the data behind the following statement, but it is possible that there is a misalignment between the message that Canada puts out to the world and those actually coming here and finding out how bloody difficult it is. And maybe the message is just get a job, meaning it doesn't have to be perfect. Hopefully one doesn't have to take a serious pay cut. When you and I started to interact on this topic earlier this week, which was kicked off from a post that I had put out there, numerous people private messaged me saying they had to take serious pay cuts when they came to Canada. And I don't have a solution for that. It bothers me, it enrages me, it disappoints me, it makes me sad. But I think the reality is, how does one very quickly get employed? How does one very quickly upskill, if that's appropriate? How does one constantly network? And how does one quickly get out of that job that is less than quote unquote what they're worth in order to find the best job? And again, I don't have like a solution to that. Folks might actually say, Jed, you're dead wrong on that, meaning you should never tell people, but you have to put food on the table. It's not a good job market. And I think to your point, there are a lot of really good companies out there where you can actually have a really big impact. And I think the message to everyone hiring is, please look at foreign work experience as a good thing. If there's a school on someone's resume that you don't understand, find out a little bit more about the school. The reality is there are programs out there in the world that are exceptionally more difficult to get into than any Canadian university, and that should be valued.
Yeah, I mean, this is not it's not a new phenomena in Canada as well. I mean, like thinking back, over the years, how many times have I sat in a cab and listened to the cab driver talk to me about the fact that they're, actually doctors in their home country, right? Or engineers or, business owners that, could not find the opportunity that they thought they would get in Canada, and therefore are now driving cabs, which I have huge respect for, because again, it goes back to the attitude of like, you got to put money on the table, but stay active and stay, talk to people, and get to know them. And I'm not sure that we can solve the problem at hand. I think that there's, such a huge volume. The reason I reached out to you last week about this was because I have now gone to a few events where afterwards I'm approached a lot. I get a lot of calls, and I've noticed more than usual. And I've been at this job for, 9 years almost. And I've never seen quite as many incoming calls around finding work. So, I mean, it's concerning.
But we have a confluence of events right now that has made it really difficult to go out and get one's ideal job, one's best job, one's dream job, right? So the takeaway for a lot of folks are, and I'm amalgamating feedback from folks that are closer to these issues than me. So over and over again, everyone's said to go out and network. Great. So the question one has to ask oneself is, what is a good way of networking, right?
Right.
If one thinks of this concept of reciprocity, if one thinks of this concept of demonstrating what you know and showing what you think, I would urge folks to consider those three pillars or those three tactics when they reach out to someone. So reach out to someone when you've done your homework. Reach out when you figure out what matters to them. Reach out when you understand what's going on in their business. And by the way, you can do that a lot of different ways. You can read IAB publications. You can scour job boards. You can look at what someone has posted. You can read an article that someone's been quoted in which they will talk about their challenges. That is a layup. That is a great opportunity that if someone speaks to a challenge that you understand, reach out to them and talk to them about that specific challenge. When I ran my own business, we had a habit of every week we would read trade publications, we would read publicly available information, and we would send letters to decision makers starting conversations. And invariably, people got back to us from CPG companies, from financial institutions. Why? Because we took an interest in their business, and using the framework jobs to be done, we understood what job they were trying to get done, and we spoke to them. It was about them and not us. And so over and over again, people are telling me, people with different experiences than me, that is probably a really good way to network. So secondly is you have to demonstrate that you know how to actually do the work, right? And so, you know, talking about your results, talking about how you've upskilled, talking about how you've added value wherever you are, and telling your story is really interesting. So again, back to this earlier comment of people have boxes and they want to fill them. They have like jobs and they want to put people in those boxes. You have to tell your story and make it really easy for someone to put you in a box. So what I often will tell people when they reach out to someone is say, here's a little bit, this is the format for the letter. I want to introduce myself. We've never met. The reason why I'm reaching out is X, and it could be any of the things that we've just spoken about. These are the 3 best jobs for me within your company, and here is why. And so it's the benefit, which is you have a job, I can do it. And then what I call the reason to believe, which is this is why I'm a perfect fit for it. I've done this job in 3 different countries. I've done this job over the last 10 years. And what you're doing is you're de-risking the hiring for that person. You should always be providing context. So for example, I worked for your largest competitor in, you know, this market, could be in Canada, could be elsewhere. And what you're doing is you're educating and you're selling and you're making it easier for the person to slot your name in a box, to hand your resume over to the talent lead or the business unit lead or whomever it is. And that's the mindset. You may say, well, why do I have to do all that? Surely they know what they're looking for, but don't take anything for granted. What you want, it's solution selling. And so we're coming off a period of, you have to go back, you know, pre-COVID, but we're coming off a year of sustained economic growth where there were just a lot of jobs and it was easier for folks to get jobs. And now we're not. And so you have to go out and market yourself, and you have to lean in and do a little bit of work. And maybe you've never done this before, and maybe you need someone to show you how to do it. Yeah. And there are people out there who are willing to help you. But those are my key pieces of advice in order to build momentum, because it's not easy. It's difficult. And this is about just building blocks that get you closer to what it is that you want, which is your dream job, your best job, a better job, whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's such an interesting and such an important topic, Jed. And I wish we, and maybe we can spend more time talking about this, and do regular updates to the industry, as new ideas come in and new stats come in. I would appreciate continuing the discussion and also providing maybe some resources to listeners. I know that Toronto Marketing Hub is a really great startup, scrappy, amazing networking group that I have just sort of become familiarized with. I know the AMA is really great as well in terms of networking. So there's a lot of
so is Ad Club, so is NABS. Yeah. So there's a lot. I mean, let's close on this. So let's 100% talk again. I think here's a key point. We are all connected to one another, whether we realize it or not. We are all part of an ecosystem. We are all part of a community. We're part of multiple communities. it is in our collective best interest to help other people and to help them land on their feet. We all come from somewhere else,
Mm-hmm. Well
right?
said. Yeah, yeah.
And so the bottom line is it actually doesn't take a lot of effort to help someone else. Now, again, the key point also is reciprocity. So you can't always be asking for help, hence the motto give, give, get. But again, we are all connected. It's easy to create little on-ramps, to remove barriers, to go out and help people. If you don't have a job, as you just said, here are 5 resources where you can go out and perhaps, you know, mine some opportunities. So I think if folks all adopt that mentality, good things will happen. And then I look forward to speaking again on this topic with new data, new information, new strategies, new tactics, and new ways of helping people and building up the community.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for that. And we'll talk soon.